Chapter 7, November 2nd, 2015, Owen Sound City Council. If you want to follow along in the agenda that we've been through all day yesterday, there was about 366 pages of agenda. Go to owensound.ca and look down the left-hand side of the page, and it'll show agendas, and you can get into it and find the date there and follow along. We met in camera for a few minutes starting at 6:45. And now we're moving into the regular meeting. Number 3, additional items. Anybody? Nothing to add? Going this way. Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a brief comment about Random Acts of Kindness Day and Festival of Northern Lights opening.
So 3 items. Next, Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have statistics from the DIA meeting for downtown and announcement for Festival of Northern Lights.
And who is next? Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question for Mr. Becking about project update status for 8th Street and 3rd Avenue East.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg, was your hand up as well? No? Staff? Ms. Coulter?
Thank you, Worship. I have a letter dated November 2nd from Grace Salvo Conservation that's on your table with respect to the Excellence in Manufacturing site plan.
Okay. And last chance, gone. Number 4, disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Anyone? Seeing none. Number 5 is confirmation of minutes. Councillor Gregg.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor McManaman, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on October 13th, 2015, as printed, be adopted.
And all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. And 5B.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McManaman, that the minutes of the public meeting respecting the proposed sale or disposition of the former 8th Street water reservoir held on October 13th, 2015, as printed, be adopted.
And all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And 5C.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McManaman, that the minutes of the public meeting respecting the proposed amendments to the procedural bylaw held on October 13th, 2015, as printed, be adopted.
And all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Go to number 6.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McManaman, that City Council now go into Committee of the Whole to consider public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We're now in Committee of the Whole. There are no public meetings tonight. There are 3 deputations, and I'm going to move 2 of them around for a specific reason that will become a little obvious, more obvious later. So I am going to start with 8A, which is Dave Alexander, Ryan McManaman, and Spencer Greason. I'm going to come up to the microphone, push the button. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillors, staff, we thank you for this opportunity just to tell you about a unique project that we have. It's called They Serve for Us, and just given that we're approaching Remembrance Day, I think it'll soon become apparent why we're here tonight. What I'd like to do, I should introduce Spencer Grayson. He's a student from the OSCVI, and then a colleague, Ryan McManaman. I think I'd call on Spencer. We have a PowerPoint. There. And so Spencer's going to take you through some of the main components of this program, and then we can take a few minutes just to answer questions and so forth after that too.
So They Served for Us is a memorial project. It's been created and designed by Mr. Alexander, Mr. McManaman, and students from the OSCVI. The focus of the project is to honor and commemorate local service women and men that gave their lives in the First and Second World War. This fall we have chosen 5 local service members from both the First and Second World War that we will be using their service files that we have access to bring their stories to light in the community. So each file is demonstrated using this sheet here that will be mounted on a plaque. So it includes just some primary information about them, the date that they were killed, their cemetery, and their unit. And it has a QR code that is scannable on most smartphones. So this is an example of the platform here. It's going to be entered into the ground, so it won't sit quite so high. So we're planning to have 5 of them in a semicircle layout that will be downtown here in Owen Sound. So the public will be able to come and view these to get the basic information. And we've entered the QR code onto the plaque as well. So with, we've got it here on this iPad here, a QR reader app where you can scan it. And it'll take you to a website that we have also created that will be put up onto the internet very shortly. On the website, each of the 5 service women or men will have this sort of write-up dedicated to them with a little background story about their service, as well as a quick biography. So again, the QR codes can be scanned using most smartphones, either through the use of an app or if the phone has it built in. So I'm going to pass this on. Okay. So we'll just pass this around here if you want to take a look. An example of the website layout there. So the website will contain similar information to the one found on the plaque. It'll just be more in-depth. And we'll give some context to them, to the soldiers. Each year we're hoping to expand the project, so hopefully in the future we can do 5 or even more than 5 more service women or men and add them to the website, so it'll just be a growing project over time.
We should mention that where we want to erect the markers, and we're hoping to do that this Wednesday, and I believe you might be aware of this fact already, is in Jervis Bay Park. One of the soldiers that Spencer's done a lot of research on is Jimmy Johnson, and so Mr. Johnson will be coming with us when we unveil the plaques on Wednesday. So we also invite your worship or any other counselor, if you'd like to come at 1 o'clock on Wednesday to see the unveiling of the plaques. We'd certainly like to have you there. We also made Branch 6, Royal Canadian Legion, aware of our project, and President McCollum and her executive have supported this initiative too. So maybe Mr. McManaman might say just a few more words.
Yeah, I think Spencer mentioned this, but just in case, our woodworking class at OSCVI actually made the plaques and was a part of this, so we are certainly happy with the collaborative effort with other departments. The other thing that we thought was good about this project, and we're hoping for your support, is just another avenue to display student work. It's one thing to keep it in the school, but this will be more of a public display and allow more members of the public to see some quality student work. So we're looking forward to your support.
Great.
Questions?
Questions,
Yes.
Councillor Lyman?
Well, one of the things when this was brought forth to the Legion, which I sit on the executive, they strongly endorsed it, and particularly because it's a student project and it goes to making the next generation aware of the sacrifices that Canadian troops have made and are still making. And I think that's very, very notable, because of the contribution this community has had over basically a century or more in the defense of this nation and its principles, and I commend you for this project. This is the kind of project that's really feel good. It's a good initiative, and thank you for the work you're doing. I think you're telling the story of those men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for freedom that we now enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kepke?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your deputation, and thank you to the students for their creativity. I just wondered, are these going to be there all year long, and how are you protecting them from the weather?
So we are, the long-term plan will be plexiglass over top of them. But for now, they will definitely be laminated, and they're going to stay up for approximately 2 weeks. So we're hoping Wednesday to start that for the following 2 weeks to take us over Remembrance Day.
Any others? I've got a couple of questions. Mr. Greason, tell me about that website. Where'd that come from?
The website was initially started up by another student at OSCVI, and there's been myself and a few others that have been involved in it. And it's made through Google Sites, so we've just been, it's the first time that I've done it personally, but we've just been kind of learning as we go. And we've been using information and the write-ups that we create and adding it to the website and building it. Over the past month or so, we've been working on that.
So once I use the QR code to go into this plaque, does that get me to other stories along the way?
Yeah,
Can I
so
transfer?
if you were to scan this QR code, it would take you to the page dedicated to Alexander Johnson in this case. And through that, you'd be able to get to the list of all the service women and men that we have. And then it's all just through links where you can click through and be able to access all 5.
So like a guy like me that's older than 49 and has a smartphone but doesn't know how to use it, is there a website? Can I go in from a www? Is there another way to get to it as well?
Yep, in the next couple of days we are going to be finalizing that sort of stuff, and we'll get it up on the internet, and we'll get that information out as well.
Tell them the web address.
It'll be www.theyservedforus.com. .ca, sorry.
Okay.
And that'll just be another way to access all
So
the same information.
www.theyservedforus.ca.
Yep.
Good. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
I know one of those classes got awards last year, right, from the Governor General, who? Were you in that class?
Spencer was one of them.
Okay.
For the Juneau Beach project last year?
Yeah, which was a provincially recognized award, which is pretty special for your class and teachers and everybody. Well done. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Now, next one, oh, yeah. Counselor Lemon, you're trying to give away your iPad. I know it. Oh, yeah. Next on the deputations, I've got Dr. Boyd, but I'd like to stand that down because there's a whole report that's going to get discussed around that. So if, with everyone's consent, if we can go to Tim Nichols-Harrison first, that doesn't throw him off. And his group, he's going to introduce our new poets, plural, laureate. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. My name is Tim Nichols-Harrison, and I have the privilege, good fortune, to be the CEO of the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library. Tonight, it's my great pleasure to introduce Owen Sound's newly appointed Poets Laureate. The Poets Laureate 2015 to 2017 is a program of the library with support from the Owen Sound Little Theatre. As far as we know, it's the only Poet Laureate program in the country that doesn't receive funding from any level of government. What that means, in Owen Sound, we're so fortunate, we're lucky to have residents who've stepped up to generously sponsor the program themselves. John A. Tamming Law, David Medill, CFP of BMO Nesbitt Burns, and Andrew Armitage, all of whom recognize the importance of arts in our vibrant community. And John's here tonight. I'd like to recognize him. We are also unique in another way. We have 2 Poets Laureate, Rob Rolfe and Larry Jensen. Were jointly appointed Owen Sound Poet Laureates 2015 to 2017 in a unanimous and enthusiastic decision by the selection committee. Rob and Larry were chosen from a field of 5 strong applicants. At first, the selection committee had some reservations about 2 people applying together and agreed to consider their joint application only if it represented something truly unique. I think it's fair to say that they were blown away. Individually, their credentials are extremely impressive. Rob has been writing poetry for almost 50 years. He's the author of 4 books of poetry, and his poems have appeared in many Canadian literary journals. He has a lifelong connection to the Bruce Peninsula and moved permanently to Owen Sound almost 4 years ago. Larry, who was born in Owen Sound, has been writing and performing music for 40 years, including 20 years at Summerfolk. He's released over 15 albums of original songs and was awarded the very first Owen Sound Cultural Award in recognition of his long-standing contribution to his home community. Together, Rob and Larry have been developing projects that fuse the spoken word, songs, lyrics, and poetry with instrumental music to explore working-class stories of Grey Bruce, Owen Sound, Mudtown, and beyond. They truly are the people's poets. May I present Owen Sound Poet Laureate 2015 to 2017, Rob Rowe and Larry Jensen.
Thank you, Tim, and your worship, members of council. When Larry and I accepted this position, we said we wanted to broaden the audience for poetry, and we were planning to use music and poetry together in part to do that. But we also said we wanted to tell some of the untold stories of working class life in Owen Sound, and in particular Mudtown, where I live, and where Larry lived when he was younger. In keeping with that, we'd like to dedicate our performance tonight to the workers who've been laboring to replace and upgrade the road, sewer, and water lines through Mudtown along 3rd Avenue East for the last 6 months. Local artist Patty Waterfield has designed a postcard for this occasion. We left it up there with you, and we've been sharing it with members of the road crew along 3rd Avenue East, and we're sort of privileged. We have some of them here tonight too. Jeff and Steve came out tonight. The work these men and women do is physically demanding, skilled, dirty, and sometimes quite dangerous. We want to recognize and pay our respects to these workers and to thank them for the work they do to make our city a better place to live in. So, Larry?
Mayor Body, councillors, and staff, my contribution to this performance piece this evening is spoken word over music and is more about the past than present projects. I grew up in the heart of Mudtown, down there in the middle of all the factories, shipping, and all the busy workers that thrived and flourished, including my parents. This is my recollection of what went on there and how my path was altered when I ran into this thing. This is called From the Working Class. From the working class, I spent my years welding words on the assembly line of rhyme. And verse after verse after verse, constructed and carted on carriages of chorus, across the bridges I built, and through the cargo door, out onto the metaphor floor. The maker of music in the underfunded factory of song. But my father's world was of nuts and bolts and hardwood to be heisted and scaled. Well, unions of men tending time clocks, whistles of steam scream, it's time, it's time. And the week starts, and the week ends, and the week go home. And the years creep by, and markets build, markets dry, and the factory stacks, cracked and crumbled, lay flat on the shoreline, waiting. Just waiting to reappear, just waiting to hear from the working class.
As you walk next to the old slip, heady with the scent of milkweed, huge digging machines sit waiting. The chicory, its petals still not open, trembles like a blue paintbrush. The three-axle rock truck driver is just one of the boys. She's not big. In fact, she's smaller than Agnes McPhail, tall girl off a farm, who said, "I too can do this, and I will." Monday is the worst, the long week ahead, the nightly eeriness of the digger, prehistoric mantis, under a streetlight turned again into a big working machine. You have 50 hours to go. "Hey, Stevie, did you go home for a quickie?" Lionel was shouting at him from down in the hole. "Nah, but that's why you're only a shovel man, Lionel. Your mind's in the gutter."
Out our back door ran 2nd Ave, north, 17th Street, east side. Corralling the coal, the cattle, the lumber yards, the oil tanks, and the ships, and the long, long freight trains. The freight trains. Running somewhere into the night, and in time did not return. That was my playground. As a son from the working class.
Great jaws swung into the hole. "It's about trusting the operator," he said, sinking his own shovel deeper into the mud. I looked at the operator. The sunglasses he wore hid his eyes. On this day, clouds of dust swallowed dozers, trucks, loaders, and diggers. You can sip water, or you can pray for a breeze. Makes no difference. Work goes on, one load after another. "The people up top don't think about us working down in the hole," he said. "They all flush their toilets. But if we're down here changing their shitter pipe, man, it's an open sewer. Lets out on our hands." In summer, spirits lift before quitting time. The jokes get funnier. The job easier to take than it was an hour ago. It's Friday. The gulls are drifting home. The road work's done.
Blue, blue water, brown, brown mud. Break that stone with broken bone. Sweat and blood, sweat and blood, and waiting for their time to pass. Just an echo, just an echo, just an echo from the working class.
Thank you very much.
My partner Rob has one more thing to announce. It's not a poem, it is a public announcement.
And before I do that, if I could indulge for 1 second, I just want to say thank you to Steve and Jeff who came out, and you guys as city councilors. They're only the face of the crews that are out there, but as city council, you can be proud of this group because the residents along the shore have been so impressed with the time they've taken to help us deal with that 6-month construction project. Thank you. The library asked me to make this announcement. The International Festival of Authors is having an event at the library, and the library would like to invite everyone to, not just the council, but across the city, to join poets Stevie Howell and Jeff Latozic at the library for a reading of their latest works, Sharps and Safely Home Pacific Western. That event takes place next Monday at 7 o'clock at the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library, and tickets are $5. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So, questions, comments? Councillor Lemon first, and then I'll go to Deputy Mayor Wright.
When the program started for a poet laureate, I was hoping it would continue. It has continued, and it's gotten better and better and better. That was very, very moving because it made me think back to the factories that were along there, Empire Stove Works, Keenan's, McQuay Tannery, and many more. Also on the west side, Kennedy's and the other foundries and the grain elevators and the freight trains that used to really slow traffic down on 10th Street, for those of us that remember. Sometimes for an hour at a time, you sat there and waited while the cars went back and forth. It seemed to be an eternity, but that was part of being in Owen Sound. Thank you very, very much, and I hope you'll do more to pursue that vein of our history, because it's important that something carries on those memories. And thank you very much. It was very, very moving. Thank you.
Okay. Good. On behalf of all of us, thank you. Congratulations. Rob, thanks for bringing your talent to town. Larry, who I've known since whenever, the Gold Rush Saloon and Ainsley Woods, and songs like 5 Years, and I found this little white thing that on the record shelf a couple weeks ago that I've still got. It goes around and you put something on it with a penny on top of that, and it plays your voice. You'd never believe it. And so it goes back a long way. So, because we're thanking Rob for bringing his talent to town, we're thanking you for not leaving town, I suppose, although there was a time I thought you should have and probably could have done anywhere in the world. So thanks, congratulations. Thanks, Patty, for the card. This is pretty neat for those who get to see it. And thanks to sponsors, John, who I see here, and our library, Tim. There he is back in the corner. And everyone, I think I saw Liz there somewhere, who's probably involved. Congratulations to all, and thank you.
If I could just say, too, the very first poet laureate, Liz Zetlin's here tonight. And
yes.
Without her, we wouldn't be here. So.
We appreciate her efforts. Thank you. Thanks. Just wait for a minute. Next matter on our list, which will lead to a report, is 8B. So I'm going back to 8B. And Dr. Deborah Boyd from the Greybury's Pet Hospital is here to talk to us about a proposal for parking on 11th Avenue, I believe. So you want to come up to the microphone and welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. After hearing that song, it sort of puts everything in perspective. I apologize for bringing forward a relatively small kitchen-type item to the council, but I think that there's more to it than just a simple street problem, that I hope that you'll understand the bigger picture and the bigger issues that involved following my deputation. Just to give you a little background, when the Grey Bruce Pet Hospital investigated expanding our veterinary practice to 1104 8th Street East, we proposed a 10-car parking lot. The City Planning and Engineering Department rejected our proposal and limited us to a 5-car parking lot and a designated handicap parking spot in order to meet the minimum bylaw requirements at the time. Their concerns, we believe, were related to setback from the residential home that abutted us and the desire for us not to take down a lot of very old large trees. We knew that the minimum mandatory requirements, parking spaces, would not be adequate for our staff and our patrons, but we were told that there was nothing preventing our staff from parking on the street. Depending on the day, we currently have between 2 and 4 of our staff who park on the street, because we prefer to leave our parking spaces in our lot available to patrons who may need to carry cats and carriers or walk dogs that might be pulling them over or carry large bags of dog food into their car. Over the years, there have been numerous confrontations with neighbors who have placed inappropriate and threatening messages in car windshields of our patrons and others, and have yelled at our staff who are within their rights to park on the street and turn their cars around at the end of driveways. After one of the first meetings of the Operations Committee on this issue, we became aware of their concerns, and we advised our staff to be more respectful of how and where they parked and asked that they use the church parking lot to turn around to enable parking on the west side of the street when coming from the maid office and our secondary office. This is a regular movement that we do between the two offices. And we do this several times a day. Specifically, we ask them not to park opposite the entrance of driveways on the east side of the street and to be sure to leave at least 3 feet from the bumper of any driveway. The parking problems residents continue to observe are primarily the result of staff and students at Georgian College who take advantage of free street parking to avoid paying for parking at the college. Neighbors agreed at the last meeting of the Operations Committee that the problem is the parking from the college and not the local businesses. This is evidenced by the fact that they have no concerns during the summer months, and in fact, the street can be quite vacant during those times, on Fridays, exam days, reading weeks, when the college is not operating at full capacity. In fact, several neighbors commented that they have good relations, and specifically with us, and do not feel that we are the primary concern. During the winter months of heavy snowfall, the street can become quite narrow, especially on days when the west side is congested with cars that are being parked haphazardly. Pedestrians are required to walk on the street due to snow accumulations, and with Sydenham and OSCAVI and Georgian College, there's a fair amount of pedestrian traffic that winds its way up that street as it's being funneled from the north residential areas. The south end of the street, where we're located, becomes even more congested during adverse weather conditions, with parents dropping children off at the intersection of 8th Street East so that they can walk the rest of the way to school on a sidewalk. However, we have noticed a significant improvement with the posting of no parking signs just north of the intersection and with the rerouting of the bus service. So the proposal that came up and that was being brought to council today from the Operations Committee from the last meeting was that the solution to this problem was to restrict parking on 11th Street East or 11th Avenue East to 2-hour parking during school hours. We'd like to respond to that as not an adequate response from our standpoint. So what are the main issues? The main issues are the safety of children and pedestrians who are walking up the street. Those are obviously limited to the school year, and that was why they wanted to designate the time frame during the school period. Walking on the street does become particularly hazardous in the winter months when snowbanks reduce visibility for drivers, including those residents trying to pull out of their driveways. However, if safety of these children is the driving factor to institute change, then the only real solution is building sidewalks on the street. 2-hour parking limits will only limit parking to full-time Georgian students and staff and are punitive to local businesses who require the space for staff. 2-hour parking will not deter students who have part-time courses or students who are willing to pay the parking tickets instead of the college parking fees if it's not strictly enforced. Designating the street completely as no parking may relieve congestion but would likely increase the speed which the traffic travels. Parked cars usually actually reduce the speed during the winter months because it requires them to slow for oncoming traffic and probably makes pedestrians safer. Further, by designating 11th Avenue East 2-hour or no parking at all could simply move the problem to 10th Avenue East, and you'll be facing these same concerns next year with another group of residents and business owners. We think the residents are mostly up in arms about the haphazard way people are parking their cars. Blocking entrances, causing obstruction to residents backing out of their driveways is a real problem, and it really is a significant problem when the snowbanks accumulate and it narrows the roadway completely. So we're talking about 3 to 4 months of the year. Parked cars should give 3 feet curb space from either end of the driveway entrance, and I think this is a legally enforceable bylaw. Cars parked opposite entrances only pose a problem when the street is narrow due to snowbank accumulations which infringe on the roadway. If illegal parking were to be enforced and the snow removal beefed up, my guess is that most of the real complaints would be resolved. My concern is if the city can't enforce illegal parking practices as they currently are, then how are they expected to enforce 2-hour parking? Maybe 2-hour parking enforcement of this street can be successful, but what happens when residents of other streets that abut commercial areas see this precedent and ask for their street to be designated 2-hour limits? Won't enforcement become a nightmare? Does the city have the resources to monitor and chalk cars along the street at least 4 times a day? How does chalking work when the winter months, when the problem is at its worst? I mean, is the council not just putting a Band-Aid on one problem only to open up Pandora's box? Is imposing 2-hour parking limit an appropriate response when the residents are respectful of our needs as a business and are frustrated by an inconsiderate few who park haphazardly during limited period of the day and season of the year? So we think safety of pedestrians walking up that street is a real problem that needs to be addressed by this council. In general, in any areas where there are students walking down streets that don't have sidewalks, safety is an issue, not just on this street, but parking on the street is not resolving it. Children should not be walking on the street during winter months. They need to be walking on sidewalks or they need pedestrian right-of-ways. Perhaps the interim response by the city could be to include beefed up snow removal on this street until such time as the sidewalks can be installed. We believe haphazard parking is the real problem, especially when snow accumulations create an obstacle course for maneuvering cars. While it has been somewhat improved with the rerouting of the bus, it will not be resolved by 2-hour parking. As I said earlier, parking is parking, and people will still park haphazardly in such a way to make it difficult for residents on the east side of the street to back out of their driveways. And correct me if I'm wrong, but surely that this can be enforced already. 2-hour parking, again, limits are punitive to us, and we need to be able to park on that street. One of the residents at one of the meetings indicated that we should park elsewhere, and I think that was making an assumption on her part that parking, our staff park, come to work, spend the day, and go home. That's not the actual operation of our facility. We have 2 offices. We are licensed under the College of Veterinarians of Ontario as a single operating entity. As a result, we only meet the requirements as combined offices. So we do not have emergency facilities at one hospital, but we do have at the other. So it is not uncommon to have to take an emergency situation from one hospital to the other where it can be served properly. If x-rays are being taken, we may have one of our staff accompany a client to the other office to have the radiographs taken. We are not a full-service operation. We do not have complete pharmaceuticals, so clients and staff may go back and forth between the offices. It's not simply a function of parking, spending the day, and going home. It's not the cost of parking. It's not parking at Georgian College that we can't afford. It's the whole logistics of operating our facility between the two facilities to make it work. A single staff person doesn't work all the time at one office. They may leave at noon hour and spend the rest of the day as they are needed at whichever office. So it's going to cause a logistical nightmare for us to have to park elsewhere. So what do we think the real solution is? I think the businesses, as Owen Sound grows, businesses on 8th Street will grow. Growth to the economy and community does have some costs, with parking being one of them. The answer, as is often the case, lies in a comprehensive strategic plan and a vision for the city, which acknowledges that compromises come with growth and prosperity. The big picture solution is to deepen the commercial buffer zone so that businesses can adequately provide for their staff and patrons. In our situation, rezoning would allow Dr. Shahabi to build a parking lot on the property that abuts ours. Surely a clean, well-maintained parking lot is more attractive to our neighbors than the status quo. This might also be the best response in other areas where the city faces similar problems. Pedestrian safety should be addressed with sidewalks and pedestrian right-of-ways, enforcement of current bylaws to prohibit blocking of residents' driveways, and more intensive snow removal on narrow residential streets that are adjacent to commercial areas and where students are walking are not just a Band-Aid solution, but a necessity if Owen Sound wants to encourage small business to locate adjacent to residential areas such as along 8th Street East. Zoning changes and sidewalk construction won't happen overnight, but parking enforcement and snow removal could go a long way to satisfy the needs of both residents and businesses along 11th Avenue East. The proposal to limit parking to 2 hours along 11th Avenue East is simply a Band-Aid solution that responds to the concerns of the residents on one street in Owen Sound while alienating the commercial property owners on the same street. There is no evidence to suggest the proposal will resolve the primary concerns of the residents, and it may add to the concerns of neighboring streets. And it's definitely an unsatisfactory solution for our operation of our hospital. Our request is that council not proceed with the 2-hour parking limits as presented by the Operation Committee, and instead consider the status quo until such time as the city has the opportunity to thoroughly evaluate the rezoning application for the parking lot proposed by Dr. Shahabi. Alternatively, should the city feel a trial of limited parking be worthwhile, then we respectfully request that the current residents, commercial and private, be given the opportunity to purchase parking passes sufficient to meet their needs, while acknowledging that the safety and enforcement issues still need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions? Councillor Lemon?
Thank you for a very excellent presentation. And I agree with you that part of the problem is the fact that that street is very, very narrow, the paved area. They're not, and there's no sidewalk in the area, yet it is a pedestrian route. And if you're coming down from Georgian College or from Sydenham Central School and walking, when you go down that street, you're taking your life in your hands because of the lack of a parking or lack of a sidewalk there. And I think you make some very salient points. And I think that we should be looking at a sidewalk, because once you define the edge of the road properly, I think some of the problems go away. But right now you have an edge of a road that goes into grass. It's really hard to define where the parking is and isn't and all that when there's no clear edge of the roadway. The other thing this winter, one thing the city can do is make sure those banks are plowed well back to keep the maximum width on that road. And this problem is not just unique to your street. There are other areas of the city where we're going to have
Councillor
to...
Lemon, I'm going to ask you to either come to a question. We're going to be discussing this in a minute. You've...
Okay, I guess my question to you is, for this winter, the best solution is what you're saying is basically increased snow removal.
Increased snow removal and.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hit the button there. Sorry, go ahead.
Your Worship, I wonder if Dr. Boyd would leave us a copy of her submission to the council this evening?
Yeah, she's indicated she can. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. I'm wondering if at this time we could move forward the portion of the operations minutes that deals with this matter. Specifically, it was part of the public meeting, so there is no specific number in the operations minute, but it's the motion OAC 21-1015-003. That's the motion number.
So on our agenda, we're going to 11C7, and then the OAC minutes for 21st of October 2015. And under that, in the agenda, I see a number 2 for public meetings.
All right.
So you want to bring, sorry? Apparently the third motion. Does that help, Carolyn? So I think what we need to do is motion to sever that from the report, deal with it now. Is that correct, Carolyn?
That's correct, Your
I'll move
Worship.
that, Your Worship.
Okay, any questions? Everyone understand the motion?
Discuss it now.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. So we're bringing that forward now. If you want to go ahead, Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. I would also, before I forget, there's a letter that was sent to council this past week from Ms. Jones, and I'm just wondering, for the record, we should probably motion to receive that correspondence. It's on everyone's desk. So I move that we receive that correspondence.
So motion to receive that. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, that is carried.
Thank you, Worship. If I might, so the motion that was discussed at operations is to approve a maximum 2-hour time-limited parking on school days during school hours of operation on 11th Avenue East, as has just been discussed. This is as you can see, a very difficult issue. I will say it's one of those issues that from time to time we get on council that there isn't necessarily a right answer. There's right on some sides and there's right on other sides, and it's more of an opinion really than anything. This was first raised to committee and council today over 3 years ago. You might say, why has it taken 3 years to get here? Because it's one of these issues, as I just said, that doesn't necessarily have a perfect solution, that there isn't an answer that meets all the needs of everyone involved, be it the residents or be it the businesses on that street. A number of items led the committee to that recommendation. A couple of things, as Dr. Boyd has discussed. That street is narrower than most streets. 10th Avenue, which is down further, is a wider street and does have a sidewalk. So that's a concern. This street, there's 3 schools that are immediately adjacent to this street. That also makes it somewhat unique to other streets in the city. There is no sidewalk, as has been discussed. That was an option that was discussed by the committee. There were 9 different options looked at by the committee over 3 years. So I would hazard to say that there hasn't been, every option has been investigated and explored and turned around on this one. The problem with the sidewalk is some of the elevations in that area. It's a $100,000 solution to build a sidewalk there. We all know the challenging capital budget we face, and quite honestly, I'm not sure where we'd find $100,000 to build a sidewalk here. One thing everyone does agree about, no matter what happens here, is enforcement. And at the end of this, I will be making a motion that we ask police services for increased enforcement on this street. I think everyone agrees that that has been lacking, and especially if we're going to make some changes tonight, increased enforcement would be appropriate. It was discussed earlier about rezoning some property nearby for a parking lot for these businesses. I would caution council to not necessarily get into that discussion. That is an official plan amendment. There are rezoning amendments that would need to take place. That is a separate issue unto itself, and And I think committee did, about a year ago, hope that that might be a solution we could look at. It has not moved forward, and there's no guarantee that it will move forward. So I don't think we can look to that as a solution, at least not now. If we go through all the options as discussed, what we can do on the street, the very first one is do nothing. That is an option that council could consider. That wouldn't answer the concerns of the residents, but that is an option. We talked about providing a sidewalk, and again, as I discussed, that's a $100,000 problem. We talked about time limiting on the street. Just put down limits for every day. That was viewed as perhaps not necessary during non-school days or the summer months. You could remove all parking on the street, ban all parking completely, just remove it. Again, that was viewed as perhaps a little heavy-handed, solving an issue that may be solving it too much, if you might. I don't think anybody necessarily agreed on that either, that it need to be banned completely. Another option was banning it on school days, or restricting it on school days. And the last option that we discussed was having parking passes for residents or businesses in the area. Again, as I said earlier, there is no right answer. It's just a matter of opinion, what we should do in this issue. What I would urge council, though, is to make a decision. You know, sometimes, and I do it too, it's appropriate to send it back to committee for more discussion or more consideration. I would suggest to you the committee over 3 years has discussed this every single way it could be discussed, and it's now time for council to just make a decision one way or the other. I would commend the residents in the area as this has been a long process, and they have come to committee numerous times and been very respectful throughout. I would commend the businesses in the area for the same reasons. They've been very good as well. It's just one of these issues that there is no easy fix. The suggested, the recommendation is to have 2-hour parking. That was to allow sort of a compromise to allow perhaps visitors to those businesses to be able to park there. Normally, business would be taken care of within that 2-hour limit. Again, the businesses would not agree with that point of view. I'm just stating what the committee talked about. Having it a 2-hour limit during school days, during school hours, so something like 8 to 4, something like that. The bylaw would have to come back to us for final approval, whatever the specific hours would be, banning it from 8 till 4, or sorry, 2-hour limit from 8 till 4 during school days, September to June, would be the suggestion. As far as parking passes on the street, doing what I just described and also allowing residents to have, or businesses to have a parking pass. They would pay a $50 a year fee, that's our standard fee, and have a parking pass. That's one that the businesses have floated as perhaps a further compromise. The residents aren't necessarily in favor of that issue, that solution. Several reasons. Unless you were going to limit the number of parking passes, there are a number of student housing buildings in the area. If you were going to allow unrestricted parking passes to be given out, that could make the situation even worse. If you allowed, you know, a particular house to buy 5 or 6 parking passes on that street. So I'll just be clear, the residents were not in favor of parking passes. That could be an option council wants to consider. If it is one, I would suggest it needs to be limited, the number of parking passes. That is something we've done on other streets that has helped alleviate the situation. But at the end of all this, I would say all of this is a compromise. There is no, as I've said it about 4 times now, there is no perfect solution. We are trying to find a compromise between the residents' concerns and the businesses in the area. So just to get the motion on the floor, Your Worship, I think I've had more than enough time with my deputation. I would move that, and I just lost it, the section from the minutes that talks about the 2-hour parking and the on school days, to get it on the floor for further discussion. I'm moving the recommendation that's in the minutes.
Okay. Everyone's hands are up. Councilor O'Leary, I think, had his hand up next. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last week, Councillor Gregg and I were going to another function, and we went, took a drive past 11th Avenue. And there was a police car there when we went up the street, ticketing a car that was completely blocking, like fully. It wasn't even part of the driveway. It was just fully blocking the driveway. And there was cars parked on both sides. But I just want to mention the only thing that I haven't heard tonight is, and it's a big one for me, if you've lived on that street for a lot of years and you want someone to come over and visit you during the day, you can't park there. So if I'm going to visit Brian Jones on a Tuesday afternoon, I'm probably going to have to park on 10th Avenue and walk to his place, and that's not right. I'll be voting in favor of the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, Deputy Mayor Wright.
Thank you very much. The first thing I want to do is congratulate Councillor McManaman and the committee for coming up with a solution, because this has been an ongoing problem for a number of years, and this looks like a fair settlement. But I do have a couple of questions. I know the street I live on is totally booked all day because the people that park on my street work downtown, and they come up and they park on my street. So I couldn't park on my street if I wanted to. It's just it's a problem that we have, and